Los Angeles, California, 1922. Shots are heard coming from the home of Fred and Dolly Oesterreich. Police are called by concerned neighbors, and when authorities arrive, Fred is found unresponsive, dead from 3 gunshot wounds. Dolly was found in a closet, locked from the outside. It seemed like a cut-and-dry case of robbery gone wrong, except it wasn't a robbery. Fred had been shot by a man 16 years younger than Dolly, a man who'd been her lover for almost 10 years. This is the story of Dolly Oesterreich, obsession, sex, and a secret lover. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Pottorff. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our Swedish friends, välkommen.
I like that.
There you go.
Very nice.
I had one this week.
There you go. That's perfect.
Yeah.
All our Swedish friends.
Yes.
Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to like, rate, and review. That helps other people to find us.
Yep.
If you've subscribed to our new YouTube channel, thank you so much. We're getting a lot of great feedback. We're so glad you're there.
And we had instant subscribers last week. That was pretty cool. I like that. All that hard work meant something.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Again, I've never been this well lit in my life. You can also join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and the Outlaws. We have lots of good fun in there. All you got to do is answer some questions. A lot of you guys are asking your friends to join, like you're suggesting for them to join. They do need to answer the questions. We have to make sure they're listening to the podcast.
They're easy questions. It's two simple little questions.
They're actually 3. You can tell that Rob didn't set it up.
I didn't set it up.
3 questions. You can do it. Not a big deal.
Yeah, I just take care of the dog.
We did have questions about the dog, too.
Scotty's a star.
Scotty is a star. If you watch the YouTube channel, he likes to hang out with Rob while we record. Yeah. He's a good puppy. He is a rescue.
Yes, he is.
He's a good dog. We love him very much.
He's our big boy.
Mm-hmm. He's our superstar.
One of the things I'm going to be doing, too, is I'm going to make a little video, a little run-through of the studio here because we've had people ask, what does it look like? I mean, you can kind of see in the background here, but I'll show you the whole thing and where Chris records and etc.
Where Rob makes his coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
It's quite an ordeal.
Yeah, exactly. Because you actually get to see me drink coffee now.
Yeah. I refrain. I refrain. Well, we're going to get started. This case is old Hollywood, old Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A lot of German names in here. I'm going to do my best, so try not to email me too much if I screw something up. I can say Milwaukee. It's just some of the German names, and I even took German. And I did see some, sources where they called her Oesterreich. I'm calling her Oesterreich because that's the way I would pronounce it in my German class, but I could be wrong.
You married a German name.
And I did. I married a Pottorff.
Exactly.
Well, let's get started. And before we do, I'm going to thank some sources. Ranker.com, Wikipedia, Milwaukee Magazine, The Vintage News, Murderpedia, AtlasObscura.com, the LA Times, the Los Angeles Evening Press, the Pasadena Post, and the book Fatal Passions by Adrian Vincent. I did read it. I will put a link in the show notes.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Walburga, or Dolly as she's known, Walburga Korschel, is born on June 12th, 1880 in Chicago, Illinois.
Okay.
Her parents are German immigrants. And if you're already intrigued by the name of Walburga, it is of Old German origin, meaning strong protection.
It reminds me of Young Frankenstein.
Walburga?
Yeah.
Put the candle back.
Put the candle back.
Yeah, what was her name every time the horse whinnies?
Frau Brucker.
I am Frau Blucher.
Whee!
Sorry.
We're already into the jokes, and I've barely made it through where she was born.
Well, it was the first thing that I thought of.
She's actually named after an ancient saint from the 8th century. Saint Walburga was a missionary in Germany.
Oh.
Now, there's not a whole lot known about Dolly's early childhood. She has a younger sister, Magdalena. What we do know is that she had an 8th grade education, and by the age of 12, she was working in a factory as a seamstress making aprons.
Wow.
The Oesterreich Manufacturing Company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we know Milwaukee. I have a sister who lives in Milwaukee. Yeah. We love it up there. It's beautiful.
Nice city. In the spring and the summer.
Yeah. Oh, it gets cold
Oh, my God.
and the snow gets deep.
Yeah.
Something we're not prepared for here.
No.
Fred William Oesterreich is born on December 8th, 1877, to Wilhelm and Johanna in Chicago, Illinois. Fred's parents are also German-born immigrants. Fred's the middle child with an older sister, Anna, and a younger brother, John. And his older sister's going to die when she's only 22.
Yeah. Wow.
And I can't find out a lot of things just because the sources are really old. So when I tell you that I have looked, I promise you, I have looked. I really have looked.
She looks high and low.
I do. And I was digging through newspapers from the early 1900s. So I do try to get all of the facts, as many of them as I can.
Right.
Now, from everything I've read, everybody lists the factory as Fred's. But according to their birthdays, when Dolly is working at the factory, she's 12 and Fred would only be 15.
Okay.
So perhaps the factory actually belonged to his father and he eventually took it over. Hard to say, but perhaps they didn't meet when she was 12 or she started working there at 12 and he didn't notice her until much later. I don't know.
What, did she go to school or?
She had an 8th grade education.
Okay.
8th grade education.
Okay.
That's it.
So she just left after 8th grade and went to work.
Yes, and went to work, which was kind of a thing. I mean, if you needed to make money to help the family survive, that's what you did.
A lot of farmers, it was the same way with their kids.
Yeah. Now they would not go to class when it was time to plant or harvest.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah.
What we do know is that she was a very popular girl at the apron factory. Loads of people liked Dolly. She was full of life. She was full of charisma. And maybe this is what attracted Fred to her in the first place. But this is where they meet and fall in love.
Okay.
And these two get married in 1897. And by the time Dolly is 20 and Fred is 23, they've already had a baby.
Oh, wow.
A son, Raymond Harold. So they're getting started early, getting married early, which they did. And if you think about it, life expectancy was so much shorter back then.
Oh, yeah.
Like to be married by the time you're 20, you were probably an old maid at 20 getting married. Isn't that crazy to think about now?
Yeah.
But Fred is running the show down at the apron factory, and these two are well known and very well liked on the Milwaukee social scene.
Okay.
Fred was hardworking, he was saving lots of money, and in fact, according to Dolly, he had rat-holed away $250,000.
Wow.
And that's close to $7.5 million today.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I wrote in my notes, Fred was in high cotton and aprons, but he had it going on.
Wow.
But by 1913, things weren't going so well. Their son died on July 15th, 1910, at the age of 9. So who knows if this is the reason behind Fred's drinking or the way he would go around the factory floor and berate his workers. But that's what he was doing. He was drinking so much that he really didn't care about satisfying Dolly in the biblical sense. And Dolly had quite the libido.
I've been reading books on the outside just so I can keep up with you.
So he'd either come home too drunk after hanging out with his boys after work, or because of his alcoholism, he just couldn't perform.
Right.
It's unclear. What is clear is that for Dolly, not having sex was intolerable. So Dolly would find men who could satisfy her sexual needs.
And I'm sure she didn't have any problem.
She did not. And for a bit, the Oesterreich house had a bit of a revolving door.
Oh, my gosh.
Dolly would bed men and then get rid of them.
Wow.
And none of these extramarital affairs lasted very long. And as I said before, Fred drank too much and was becoming kind of a mean drunk. And Dolly, in fact, would actually go to the factory to smooth things over with the employees. And one day while she's there, she sees a 17-year-old singer sewing machine repairman named Otto Sandhuber.
Dun, dun, dun.
Rob's already on to it. Otto was a 17-year-old orphan. He would later believe that his family name was Weir, but he was adopted and raised by the Sandhuber family. Now, Otto was no Brad Pitt or Bradley Cooper. He was a scrawny, thin, shy virgin who wore round glasses. He's more Rick Moranis than Ryan Reynolds. And if you don't know who Rick Moranis is...
Okay, so I'll see you later, huh? I'll give you a call.
He's the accountant in Ghostbusters.
And Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
And Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. But I love him the best in Ghostbusters.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's great. Nice doggy. Nice doggy.
But Dolly scopes Otto out on the apron factory floor. And she even tells Fred, hey, that little Otto, he's the best repairman, and you should always request Otto. And Fred's like, okay. And I'm sure Fred took one look at Otto and thought he's a scrawny little kid. And you have to wonder, did she think he was the kind of young man who would be a pushover? Somebody that she could boss around? Because Dolly likes to boss people around.
Imagine that.
So the sewing machines kept breaking at the factory, and Dolly just so happened to always be on the factory floor when this would happen. And each time, Otto Sandhuber was called. Coincidence?
I don't think so.
I think not. Then one day, Dolly calls Fred at the apron factory and tells him that her sewing machine at home wasn't working.
Is that a euphemism?
Yeah. Yeah, he's the sewing machine that's not working. Yeah. She wanted to know if he could call the Singer Sewing Machine Company and have them send their regular guy, Otto, to their home in Milwaukee. Otto packs up his tools and heads to where Fred and Dolly live, which is 13th Avenue near National Street. It was a really pretty house, I would say large for the time, for 1913. Otto rings the bell and the door swings open, and standing in the doorway is Dolly wearing a silky see-through robe, stockings, perfume, and nothing else.
Scotty's ears just went up. Didn't they? What's going to happen now?
Dolly is hot for Otto. I mean, I wrote my notes, Dolly's DTF. Now, I don't know if this is the case or not, but in my head, and if I was writing this, her robe would be trimmed in like marabou, like she's Zsa Zsa Gabor.
There'd be a gentle wind behind her.
There would be a little wind
backlighting.
behind her. Yes, backlighting, her hair flowing in the breeze. Yeah. But Dolly invites Otto in the house, and this little 17-year-old kid who's never even talked with a girl, much less kissed one, has got to either be thinking, I got to get out of here, or
Jackpot!
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. You heard my prayers. My prayers have been answered.
It's like an Animal House when the bunny comes crashing through that kid's window during the parade.
Thank you, God!
Yes, exactly. Exactly. But Otto's this 17-year-old boy, and you know the hormones are raging.
Oh, my gosh.
And Dolly says, follow me. The sewing machine is in the upper bedroom.
I wish I had my wah-wah pedal on my guitar right now so I could do a little bow, chicka, bow, wow.
Bow, chicka, bow, bow. Like a bad 70s porn movie.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Dolly's in her marabou, which I've added to the story.
Okay.
She's leading him to the bedroom. I better show you where it is.
Mm-hmm.
She's going to show him so much more than the sewing machine. When she gets him into the bedroom, he starts working on the sewing machine while she lays herself across the bed to chat with him while he works on the machine. Now, whenever he looks up from working on the sewing machine, Dolly is showing just a little bit more from under her robe. And he's embarrassed, but he's also turned on by the whole scene.
Well, of course.
And when he's finished with the repair, she calls him over on the bed. Can't you just hear her going pat, pat, pat on the side of the bed? where she pulled him to her roughly and then folded her arms around him in a, quote, nutcracker-like embrace,
Wow.
end quote.
Man, you are a nutcracker.
Okay.
No pun intended.
I was going to say, don't go there. Yeah, we'll leave that alone right now. That's too easy. That was teed up way too
I know,
easy.
sorry. But that's what I read in this one book, a nutcracker-like embrace.
Okay.
Dolly apparently has been doing Pilates.
Wait, is this a murder or a comedy?
This is a murder case.
No, there's a murder coming.
Okay.
I
All right.
promise.
Just
I
checking.
promise.
Just checking. Wow.
Dolly seduces Otto, and right there in the home of Fred and Dolly, Otto loses his virginity. Now, I read in one source that Otto skipped down the street after leaving. And according to this same source, Dolly was pleased with Otto's performance.
Is it true what they say about the way you people are gifted?
Okay.
And she was pleased.
Okay.
She was pleased with Otto.
It's true. It's true.
I'll leave that to your imagination.
We'll just, leave it there.
Yeah, I was also, as I was reading this, I was like picturing Otto out the door, skipping down the street, giving a little bell kick on his way. Yeehaw!
Oh, my.
Before he left, Dolly promised Otto there are going to be more afternoons like this to come.
More sewing machine repairs.
More. Yes, but on a serious note, Dolly has basically groomed this young man. It started at the factory where she talks to him. She always wants to be around when he's fixing several sewing machines that
Right.
mysteriously stopped working.
Right.
She inserted herself into his life.
So to speak. Sorry.
No pun intended.
Sorry.
For the next 3 years, Otto and Dolly would meet for an afternoon of passion. And sometimes Dolly would meet Otto at the boarding house where he lived, and sometimes Otto would come to her house. Other times, these two would just check into a seedy hotel. Now, usually, Dolly would tell Fred that she was sick and that she was going to stay home all day and not come down to the factory on the days that Otto would show up.
Okay.
Which, remember, before Otto, she's there a lot. But on those days, Otto would come to the house and the two of them would spend the day in bed. And it was pretty easy because Fred was such a penny pincher. They didn't have any staff in the house. So Dolly would always be alone.
Gotcha.
And on these days, apparently, Dolly was insatiable because Otto will later say that one day they made love 8 times
Wow.
in a single ecstasy-filled day.
Well, that's not surprising.
Wow.
8 times.
Well, you're 17 years old.
That's what I wrote. He's 17, 18, 19 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
And Dolly couldn't be happier.
Yeah.
Yeah. But these two were getting sloppy, and the neighbors had started to notice that Otto was coming over and spending the day, or maybe he was doing bell kicks down the road when he left. Yeah.
The clue was when he did a cartwheel out the front door.
Yes, yes. But the neighbors are thinking, what the hell's wrong with her sewing machine?
Get
Yeah.
a new one.
But someone who remained anonymous told Fred, I think you got bigger problems than your wife's faulty sewing machine.
Yeah.
Fred confronts his wife Dolly, and she calmly tells him that a book salesman had been pestering her, but she would put a stop to his visits. And Fred says, okay then.
Okay.
Secretly, Fred has hired Philip Stover, a private investigator, to watch Dolly from the outside. But from the inside, Fred has hired Alvy Judkins, who's an office girl from his factory. Fred wants Alvy to stay with Dolly when he goes away on business. But as soon as Fred would leave and Alvy would show up, Dolly would say, Alvy, get out.
Vamoose.
You got to go home. And she would send her home, and she would call her back to the house right before Fred was due back home.
Gotcha.
Dolly tells Otto, look it, we've got a nosy neighbor, and you can't come and go anymore like you used to. And so you would think he would say, okay, that's the end of that.
Right.
Not so fast.
Uh-oh.
Dolly says to Otto, you should move into the attic in this house.
What?
That way you can be here all the time. And young Otto in his head is thinking, free room, free sex, free food.
What could possibly go wrong?
What could go wrong? Not to mention the fact that Otto's fallen in love with Dolly. Of course he has. He's this scrawny orphaned kid, and Dolly's having sex with him.
And how old is she at this time?
She's 16 years older than him.
Okay.
So she's like 32 and he's 17 when they start.
Okay.
Yeah. But Otto's thinking, I don't have to pay any bills.
Yeah.
And I can pursue my dream of becoming a novelist. He loved pulp fiction novels, the sex, the scandal, the murder. And if he doesn't have to work, he can hone his skills as a writer.
And he's got a lot of research happening.
And he's got a lot to you write about what you know.
Exactly.
Write what you know. Yeah.
Boom.
He quits his job as the sewing machine repairman and he moves into the attic space inside Dolly and Fred's home. Dolly cleaned up the space a little bit, not a whole lot. She put a single mattress and a chamber pot in there for him. Otto brought the few books that he owned, paper and a pencil.
Okay.
After Fred would leave for work, Otto would come out of the attic and do household chores, sweeping floors, dusting, washing dishes, peeling vegetables, all the things that Fred thinks Dolly's doing while he's at work.
How does Fred not know that somebody's living in their attic?
Fred doesn't know.
Wow.
Fred doesn't know. Wait till you hear the rest of this.
Okay. You can't make this up.
Yeah, so he's doing all these household chores. He's also, of course, he's doing Dolly.
Yeah.
But I read in my research that Dolly was also doing the local iceman, the butcher, and the milkman.
Okay.
And when these encounters would happen, Otto would watch what was going on through a peephole.
Oh, my.
Now, if Dolly and Fred had a social engagement, Otto would come out of his little hidey hole and get some exercise at night. And while Fred was home, Otto had to remain silent because Otto's very small living quarters are right above the marriage bed of Dolly and Fred.
Holy cow.
And sometimes Fred would be in the mood, and Otto had a front row seat to the woman he loved having sex with another man.
Wow.
Now, apparently at one point, Dolly asked Fred not to be so vocal when they made love. And when he asked why, she told him that someone might hear him, to which Fred replied, "Who the hell can hear us?"
Guess.
Yeah. Dolly said to him, "Nobody, I guess." It's also been said that Otto finally approached Dolly, telling her that he didn't like it when she was sleeping with Fred. But Dolly tells Otto, "Look, I don't have any money and I don't have any skills, and I'm not leaving my millionaire husband who's rat-holed away $7 million.
Right.
Because eventually he's going to die and I'm going to be a wealthy widow."
Yeah.
And after that, Otto didn't bother her about her and Fred having sex anymore.
Yeah. Otto's like, okay. Yeah. Okay. I get it.
Now, like you said, how could Fred not know? Well, there are a couple things. There was a lock on the inside of the door to the attic, and that way, if Fred tried to get into the attic, it wouldn't open, and he would just assume that the door was jammed.
Right.
And Fred did hear things, odd noises. And Fred and Dolly were in bed one night, and he thought he heard someone clear their throat.
Oh, my.
And when he bolted up in bed asking Dolly, "What was that?" Dolly says, "Honey,
You're imagining things.
you're imagining things." Or it was a mouse. Or you're drinking too much. You're imagining these things because you're drunk.
That was her go-to.
That was her go-to.
Yeah.
When Fred and Dolly went out for the night, Dolly would release the trap door to the attic just before leaving. Otto would listen for the sound of the couple closing the front door, and as soon as he heard that, he'd run downstairs and he'd eat. There was lots of German food, rye bread, cheeses, liverwurst, bologna, and Otto would eat it all or anything else edible that happened to be in the house.
Okay.
Then Fred would go looking for food, for leftovers from the day before. This happens in our house.
It reminds me of when Luke was in high school.
When our son was in high school,
Oh, my
Rob would
gosh.
have leftovers. Luke would come home.
Then
Then Rob would go looking for him.
Yeah, they were gone.
They were gone.
Where's my skyline chili?
Yeah. Where's my food? I don't know. He probably ate it. Yeah. But Fred's looking for his leftovers from the day before. And he'd sit down at the table and he'd ask Dolly, why is the roast from the night before so small? She managed to convince him that he had eaten it the night before while he was drunk.
Well, he was drunk,
Yeah,
of course.
yeah. And then Fred would say, okay, whatever. Now, while Otto is confined to the attic and not cleaning or meal prepping or having sex with Dolly, he's writing. He'd write it all out in longhand, and then he would give the pages to Dolly, who would type them up for him. And Dolly even mailed the stories to Pulp Fiction magazines using a post office box she got for Otto using an alias.
Okay.
And at first, he only got rejections. Welcome to the writing world, Otto.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got nothing but time on his hands. He's locked away in the attic, so he just kept writing.
And he doesn't have a burner phone.
And he has nothing. He's got a pencil and paper.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And a chamber pot and a bed.
Nice.
But finally, one of his stories gets published, and then another, and then another. Then one evening, Fred is out in the garden, and he looks up in the window of the attic, and he sees a man, and they lock eyes.
Oh, no.
And now Dolly had warned Otto, don't go near the windows.
Yeah.
But the poor guy isn't seeing the sun very much. He's like a vampire.
Right.
Well, Fred's livid. Dolly's been gaslighting him this whole time about the sounds in the house. He comes racing in the house yelling, I knew it. I knew somebody was up in the attic. I just saw him move at the window.
Wow.
And Dolly, of course, volunteers to go investigate. I'll go do it.
Yeah.
I'll go look. Let me go look.
Yeah. I'll take care of this.
I'll take care of this. And when she comes down from the attic, she feigns concern for her husband. Quote, Fred, you've been working too hard at the factory. You're seeing things. Promise me you'll go to a doctor. End quote.
Did he buy this?
Fred thinks he's going crazy
man.
when he's not. And he goes to see a doctor and he's told to take it easy at the factory, not to work so hard. And he walked out of the office with tranquilizers.
Oh, wow.
Just what a man who drinks too much needs, right?
Oh, well, that's going to give her a little bit more time now.
Exactly. By this time, Otto's been living in the attic and sleeping with Dolly for 3 years.
Wow.
He's been living in the attic for 3 years.
Good night.
But Fred is ready to move. And Dolly says, well, that could be a problem.
No.
I got something I got to move that I don't want you to know about.
Yeah.
So Dolly says, okay, we can move on one condition. What do you think it is?
At this point, I have no idea.
The house has to have an attic.
Okay.
We can move, but I need a better attic.
Wow.
And I did read in one source that she would tell him she needed that attic space to store her fur coats.
Okay.
I don't know if he bought it or not.
Yeah. She must have a lot of fur coats.
Yeah. So they moved to this large house at Newport Shores, which is now Port Washington. I've been to this little town. It's lovely. Otto's packing up his cot and chamber pot and moving right along with them.
Yeah. He doesn't have a lot to pack.
Yeah. In this new house, Otto isn't right above Fred and Dolly's bedroom.
Okay.
And Fred couldn't hear Otto clear his throat.
Yeah.
And Otto didn't have to hear Fred and Dolly having sex.
Right.
But the marriage is really going downhill. And it's not just because Dolly is keeping her secret 20-year-old lover in the attic to use as her boy toy whenever she likes.
And various other delivery men.
Yeah. Fred was really drinking and he was depressed and liked to argue. And by this time, Otto's been living in the attic for 7 years.
How often does he actually leave the house?
Well, every time Fred leaves for work, Otto comes out.
Right.
And if they go out at night, they were kind of socialites in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And if they went out at night, he got up and he would go downstairs and raid the refrigerator.
Wow.
So he's been in the attic, well, 2 different attics, for 7 years.
Jeez.
He's deeply in love with Dolly. And by all accounts, she loves him as well.
Right.
And as Fred became more and more distant, Otto and Dolly were still going strong. And Otto is still writing, and he's making a little bit of money.
Okay.
Not that he saw any of it. Dolly was putting it all away for him.
Gotcha.
That's what she was telling him. Then, one night, Dolly and Fred were out at a German beer party. A German beer party. Doesn't that sound amazing?
Yeah.
So Otto comes out of his hidey hole to eat. But while they're out, Fred and Dolly have a fight. And Fred storms off and goes straight home. And he walks into his house and finds a short, slim, pale young man sitting at his dining room table eating leg of lamb.
Yeah, I can just imagine the freeze frame. He's got that big leg of lamb in his mouth, and he looks wide-eyed.
It's like when the dogs get caught with something.
Exactly.
And Fred yells at Otto, "What the hell are you doing here?" And Otto says, quote, "I'm hungry, sir," end quote. And Fred yells at him again,
"Stop eating my meats."
"So you're the one who's been eating all of my meat."
Jeez.
The irony of the quote.
Sounds like a Friends episode.
And Otto stutters and says, "Yeah, it's me. I've been eating all your meat."
This is just bizarre. Good grief.
Fred tosses Otto out into the night. Otto can't go back to the attic. He's got to sleep outside that night.
Wow.
And after Fred leaves the next day, he meets up with Dolly. And it's at this point you'd be like, okay, you've been had. Just get out of the house.
Yeah.
Say goodbye to Dolly. Get on with your own life. You've been writing. You've spent too much of your life serving and servicing Dolly.
Yeah.
But you know, you made your bed. Now you got to lie in it.
So to speak.
Or as we say in the South, you climbed into that saddle, so you better be ready to ride.
Ride 'em, cowboy.
I haven't heard that one yet.
And that's what Dolly's saying.
Listen, being married to somebody from the South, I've heard more phrases.
You climbed in the saddle, you better be ready to ride.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dolly tells Otto, go to Los Angeles. Go to Los Angeles. I'll give you the money that you made from your stories. Dolly says, I'll figure out the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So he does. Otto leaves Milwaukee and he heads out to L.A. And after he arrives, he takes a job at an apartment building. I mean, he's been cleaning Fred and Dolly's house all these years.
Yeah.
Otto and Dolly wrote letters to each other using the P.O. box that she set up for him to send and receive his published stories. So they already have this line of communication set up.
Right.
But with her boy toy in L.A., Dolly comes up with a plan.
Okay.
It's now 1918. She tells Fred, you know what? We should move to California. We should move to L.A. where the weather is better and the houses are cheaper. Not even kidding you on that one. It was the early 20s and being out west was like being in the wild, wild west. Because the first Hollywood movie studio was only 7 years old at this time.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Also, the apron business was doing so well.
It was a booming.
It was. And now they could have a West Coast facility.
There you go.
But before they pack up and leave, Dolly said to Alvy, the companion Fred hired for Dolly, quote, I don't know why I'm going to California with him. You know what I think about him, end quote. And Alvy says, quote, why don't you divorce him, end quote. And Dolly replies, quote, no, there's only one way to get rid of him, and it isn't divorce, end quote.
Dun, dun, dun.
That's called foreshadowing.
Yeah, big time.
That's a huge foreshadowing. Dolly and Fred go to L.A. They stay in a hotel for a while they look for this new house. One was something most California homes don't have at the time, an attic.
Oh, of course.
And while this is going on, Dolly and Otto are back to meeting in cheap hotels. But soon, Dolly found a beautiful home with an attic on North Street, Andrews Place. It's a fancy area. And Otto is ready to move back in again. And what happens is, actually, Otto moves into the attic first. He moves in first at 858 Andrews Boulevard in Los Angeles before Dolly and Fred's movers even show up with the furniture and belongings.
Good night.
He's in the new house when the movers show up.
Wow.
He's already living in the attic.
Okay.
For 4 years, Otto stayed cooped up in the attic so he could be, quote, near the only person in the entire world who cared whether I lived or died, end quote.
Wow. Poor Otto.
And for 4 more years, he does housework. And he does Dolly. It's prohibition, so what else does Otto do in his spare time when he's not in bed with Dolly? He makes bathtub gin.
Okay.
And contrary to its name, bathtub gin was not actually made in a bathtub. The name refers to the process of watering down the strong homemade spirits to make it more drinkable. And since bottles were too tall to fit under a faucet in the kitchen sink, yeah, they took it to the bathtub. Moonshiners used the bathtub instead. And that's where the term bathtub gin came from.
I had no idea. Wow.
I'm just teaching everybody something new today.
Yeah. Yeah.
The term bathtub gin has a stigma of bad taste and poor quality, but it was what they had while alcohol was illegal. It's basically moonshine with botanicals added in for flavor. I am not a gin drinker. I think it tastes like Christmas trees. I don't care how expensive it is. Fred has found new strength in Los Angeles. He thinks the sunshine is doing him a world of good. He loves his new factory in LA, and he spends a lot more time there. He's not drinking as much, but he's working just as much.
Okay.
Then on August 22nd, 1922, Dolly and Fred had been out for the night. As they're returning home, they're doing something they did a lot. They're fighting. It's not anything new. They fight all the time.
Right.
But this time it's so loud that old Otto up in the attic thinks this is more than a shouting match. Otto hears a loud thud, and Dolly lets out a scream. Otto thinks Fred is beating Dolly. Now, what had actually happened was that Dolly slipped and fell on a throw rug, something I've done before. She wipes out and screams.
I don't need a throw rug to slip and fall.
A worried Otto climbs out of his attic space and picks up two .25 caliber handguns. He rushes down the stairs and comes face to face with Dolly and Fred.
Oh, wow.
And according to Otto and Dolly, Fred immediately recognizes Otto as the guy who was raiding his refrigerator. Yeah, he's like, you again.
I can't get rid of you.
I can't get rid of you.
Put my chicken wing down.
Yeah, my leg of lamb. Fred flies into a rage and he tackles Otto to the ground. Fred reached for the gun and put his hands around Otto's neck. One or both of the guns go off, and then Otto panics, pulling the trigger 2 more times.
Wow.
Fred was lying dead on the floor of his living room with 3 bullet holes in his body. Dolly panics. Otto, ever the writer of fiction, decides that they can stage the whole thing to make it look like Dolly and Fred had caught burglars in the act.
Okay.
So he's taken charge.
Yeah.
He takes Fred's diamond watch from his wrist. He ushers Dolly into a closet and he locks her inside and throws the key down the hallway. Then he rushes back to his hidey hole in the attic, taking the guns and Fred's watch with him.
So he stayed.
He stayed. He went back to the attic. He staged the whole thing and then went back in the attic. He didn't leave the house. He stayed in the attic.
Wow. Okay.
Now, meanwhile, the neighbors are hearing this fighting and they hear the gunshots and they call police.
Yeah.
And when the LA police arrive, they can hear Dolly crying and shouting inside the closet, "Oh, Fred! Oh, Fred!" Police can see the key in the hallway. They open the door and they let Dolly out. And Detective Herman Klein is on the scene that night. And when Detective Klein meets Dolly, he does not like her. He begins interrogating her. "Did you and your husband ever fight?" And Dolly says, "Never, never."
Just ask the neighbors.
Never,
fight. Yeah.
never.
Okay.
And Detective Klein doesn't buy it, asking again. He says, not even a little bit. And Dolly says, "Nope. She was going to die on that hill. No, we didn't fight."
Yeah.
She and Fred had 0 arguments, and they especially had 0 arguments of late.
Okay.
And the detective thinks, listen, all couples have spats. She's lying.
Right.
Then the police go through the house, and she tells them, "The 2 of us happened upon men robbing our home." She thinks they took Fred's watch. She thinks they took Fred's watch before they shot him.
Okay.
But when police look at Fred, he still has his wallet, and his pocket is stuffed with a big old wad of cash.
Oops. Forgot about that.
Oops.
Yeah.
I know. Come on, if you're going to write fiction, you
Yeah.
got to get all the details
Yeah,
right.
Cover the details.
Detective Klein tries to trip up Dolly on her story, but she remains pat. This is it. I'm sticking to it. But when the crime lab reports that Fred was killed with a 25, the detective was convinced that Dolly's story was false because, quote, no burglar uses a 25 caliber gun. That's a woman's gun, end quote.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is it a woman's gun?
Well, I have a little story I'm going to interject here.
Okay.
So I got my conceal and carry license a few years ago. Don't email me. I only did it because people I write about in my books, they carry guns, and I needed to make sure I was writing it correctly. You have to go through a ton of stuff to get this license, a written test, a shooting test at the gun range, and I had a little 25 caliber Beretta. That was my gun.
Gotcha.
And my instructor, who was like a 7-foot ex-Swedish military black ops dude, looks at my gun, because you have to take them apart, clean them, put them back together again. He looks at my gun and he says, you're not going to kill anybody with that little thing. You're just going to piss somebody off.
I remember that.
To which I replied, not if I empty the magazine.
Yeah. Yeah.
My point is, my instructor was saying the same thing that he's saying to Dolly. A burglar isn't going to carry this gun.
Right.
A woman is. But they can't prove that Dolly had anything to do with the death of her husband. And don't forget, she was locked in the closet
Yeah.
from the outside.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Fred's closest friend is telling the Los Angeles Times that Fred didn't have enemies, and it had to be just as Dolly said, a burglar.
Mm-hmm.
But Detective Herman Klein is not buying it. Dolly's taken to jail while they're sorting through the whole thing. And then Herman Shapiro, an attorney and a friend of the family, comes to see Dolly in jail. She takes him to a quiet little corner and she whispers to him, I need a favor. I need you to get some food and go to my house.
Oh.
Leave it on the floor of the bedroom and scratch the wall near the dresser. Tell no one.
Wow.
And Herman Shapiro does as he's told. He gets some food, he goes to the house, but he didn't tap on the wall. He whistled. And when he did, Otto comes out from behind the wall. He climbs out of his hidey hole.
Wow.
And Herman Shapiro was startled, but the two of them actually talked. And over the next 11 months, Otto and Herman became friends. See, Dolly told Herman that Otto was her, quote, vagabond half-brother, end quote,
Okay.
who lived and hid in her home.
Wow.
So Herman doesn't know that Otto is Dolly's sex toy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dolly moves again. She doesn't want to be in the home where Fred was killed. This time she moves to 101 North Beechwood Drive in Hollywood. She wanted away from this house, which makes sense.
Sure.
This new house is smaller. It's now 1923, and Otto is moving with her again and again into the attic space. Now, he doesn't need to hide from Fred anymore, but he can't just suddenly show up in Dolly's life.
Yeah.
That's motive.
Yeah.
But when he doesn't have to be as quiet, he buys himself a typewriter.
Oh, wow. He's going uptown.
He buys it with the money he's made from selling his stories.
Right.
And his pen name is Walter Klein.
Okay.
Because of Detective Herman Klein, Otto felt like he was his arch nemesis.
Okay.
Because he's the guy who's looking for him, the killer.
Sure.
Otto does have a pretty good imagination if you think about it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Dolly is settling Fred's estate, and she hires Herman Shapiro to do this. And then once they kind of get together and he's like taking food and they become friends, she starts to flirt. Herman reciprocates. These two start dating.
Yeah.
And because Herman did such a good job of taking care of Fred's business dealings as well as taking care of her, because these two are now lovers,
Mm-hmm.
Dolly gives Herman a diamond watch saying, quote, here, I want you to have this. It belonged to dear Fred, end quote.
Wow.
But Dolly, now a free woman and a wealthy widow, is spreading the love. She's not just sleeping with the attorney Herman Shapiro and Otto in the attic, where their relationship has gone from lovers to dominant and submissive, which probably began way before all of this.
Right.
She's also started an affair with a man named Roy Klum.
Good grief. How does she keep all this straight?
Where does she find the time?
Holy cow.
I told you she's insatiable.
Yeah.
I've read that Roy was an actor. I've also read that he was a businessman. Maybe he was both. But after she starts sleeping with Roy...
Wait, is that actually possible? I'm in the entertainment business, so don't send me emails. I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah, true. But after she starts sleeping with Roy, actor/businessman, she tells him, I need a favor. Dolly needs lots of favors. Dolly wants Roy to take one of the .25 caliber pistols used in the murder of Fred, and she tells him to dump it in the La Brea tar pits.
Well, that'll take care of it.
And he did.
Yeah.
Dolly told him part of Fred's murder, saying that she was afraid the gun was too similar to the one used in the murder, and she didn't want Detective Klein to find it.
Wow.
So Roy, such a good and dutiful lover, does just that. She takes the other gun to her neighbor, John Farber. She tells him the same story. I have this gun. It's very similar. It's a .25. I don't want this detective to come after me. Can you do something with it? Will you bury it? And he does. He buries it under a rose bush in his yard.
Why didn't she just have both of them dumped in the La Brea tar pits?
Why didn't she just get rid of them herself?
Yeah, okay.
I'm telling you, she's a bossy woman. She's a dominant. She likes telling people what to do.
Yeah.
Then in 1923, Herman Shapiro is ready for the vagabond half-brother to vacate the house.
Sure.
Get out.
It's like Eddie Murphy in Trading Places.
Yeah.
Get the fuck
F
out.
out. And that's what he's saying. That's exactly what he's saying.
Yeah.
And here's why. Shapiro isn't a criminal defense attorney. Dolly has hired Frank Dominiquez as her defense attorney. And Herman Shapiro tells Frank about Otto, who's living in the attic. And Frank says, get him out of the attic and away from Dolly.
Yeah.
And Otto packed up reluctantly and left Los Angeles and moved to San Francisco, where he became a janitor.
Okay.
And then he moved to Canada, taking the legal name of his pen name, Walter Klein.
Okay.
Now, in court, Dolly's doing really well. Her attorney, Frank, moved for a dismissal of the murder charge, and Herman Klein, who is madder than a box of frogs, just watches as the judge grants dismissal of the case. And the stolen watch that turned up?
Yeah.
Well, Dolly said she found it in a cushion. So, case closed.
Okay.
Shapiro tells Dolly, we can only be together if you give up Otto completely. I don't ever want to see him again.
Right.
And she does. And while Otto is in Canada, he meets and marries a Canadian woman named Matilda.
Oh, so he
goes out on his own, finds
Gotcha.
his own woman. He's finally away from Dolly.
Gotcha.
When Otto, now Walter, comes back to Los Angeles in 1926, he tells Herman Shapiro that he didn't want his wife to know about his previous life, living in the attic, or anything that he ever did with Dolly. He and his wife were moving to Southern California, and Otto said the very thought of being near Dolly made life worth living for him.
Wow.
So he's married, but he is still
in love with her.
emotionally attached to Dolly.
Yeah.
Dolly can't stay on good terms with anybody, and in 1930, Herman and Dolly have a falling out over money. So he walks himself into the police station and tells them that Dolly threatened him, and he'd drawn up an affidavit that he turned over to them. The affidavit was the story that Otto Sandhuber had told Herman Shapiro. The attic, the lovers, and the murder of Fred Oesterreich.
Wow.
So don't mess with Herman Shapiro.
Wow.
Yeah. He didn't want any part of it, and he was like, you going to do this to me over money? We're going to fight over money? I'll show you.
Yep.
So police pick up Otto where he was working at a Los Angeles apartment house. He's arrested for murder. And then police go to Dolly's house. She, too, is arrested for murder. Again,
Yeah.
don't mess with Herman Shapiro.
Yeah. Yeah. Messing with an attorney is probably not the best
Yeah.
idea. Yeah.
April 1930, when they get Otto to the police station, Detective Klein's been waiting 8 years for this. And Otto immediately confesses.
Wow.
But he says that it was a struggle for the gun. They both reached for the gun. It's honestly Billy Flynn in Chicago.
Yeah.
They both reached for the gun.
Right.
Otto pleaded not guilty by reason of
Self-defense.
insanity.
Oh, what? Really?
Yes.
Why didn't he go for self-defense?
Because he told them that Dolly was the reason he was crazy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think self-defense would be a lot easier to prove than insanity.
Well, he confessed to it. Maybe he did say, he did say we both reached for the gun,
Well,
I know, but he pleads insanity.
Okay.
I'm just telling you what the record showed.
Well, then he's definitely nuts.
He is. And Otto and Dolly are brought to trial separately, and the press is eating every single bit of this sensational story up.
Of course they are.
They called Otto the Batman because he lived in the attic.
Nice.
They also called him the ghost in the garret.
Okay.
Otto's defense attorney was a man named Earl Wakeman, and even though Otto confessed to killing Fred, he was going to make sure the jury knew what his life was like with Dolly. So first, Shapiro throws Dolly under the bus, and now Otto's throwing Dolly under the bus.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hello, Dolly.
Yeah. The trial began in July of 1930. Otto's attorney worked the jury by explaining how the older, more experienced Dolly manipulated poor little Otto.
Yeah.
And believe me, he was such a slight, short man. Again, he looks like Rick Moranis in Ghostbusters. Otto told the jury that a typical day for him while living in Los Angeles, stowed away in the attic, quote, I made up the beds, the couple was sleeping in separate bedrooms by then, and changed the linens about 2 times a week. They loved to sleep clean, and I made up the beds for them and put away their clothes and dusted Fred's clothes because he had some beautiful things. And I would keep them in order for him and dust them and dust his shoes, so he would always look neat. And then I would wash the dishes if he wasn't home, and if he was home, he would wash them. And Mrs. Oesterreich would dry them because I couldn't then. And I would get the vegetables clean, and they were clean. Everybody praised her, how clean her things were. And I scrubbed the floor and kept it clean and kept the floor neat. She loved to have a beautiful floor. And I dusted it, end quote. Otto.
Yeah.
Come on, Otto.
Yeah. He sounds a little nuts now.
Yeah. When Otto was away from Dolly while she was in Milwaukee and he was in L.A., he couldn't wait to get back into his attic. He told the jury how she manipulated him, how he would fast. He wouldn't eat when Dolly would be mean to him.
Wow.
So she would worry about him, and then she would be nice again. How he did whatever she wanted him to do, including sex.
Yeah.
Whatever she wanted sexually, he did.
Right.
The jury did not find Otto guilty of murder, but they did find him guilty of manslaughter. But here's the problem. The statute of limitations had run out. And even though Otto was found guilty of manslaughter, he walked right out the door.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think the worst part of this for Otto is that he had to come clean with his wife, Matilda.
Right. Yeah.
And now she knows about his past and that his name isn't Walter Klein. I mean, can you imagine being married to somebody and then they're like, okay, so here's the deal. This isn't my name, and I used to live in this chick's attic.
Yeah.
When it was Dolly's turn to be tried, Dolly had the means to hire the best in the business. His name is Jerry Geisler, an attorney who would go on to defend Errol Flynn, Clarence Dow,
wow.
Charlie Chaplin,
Wow.
Busby Berkeley,
Jeez.
Bugsy Siegel,
Wow.
and even Marilyn Monroe.
Wow.
He was known in the circles of Hollywood for his reputation for winning cases that appeared to be unwinnable. And that's what Dolly had.
This is one of those cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once Dolly goes on trial, people start coming out of the woodwork. After Herman Shapiro broke his story to the police, Roy Klum walked into the station the day he saw the story in the newspapers, the actor/businessman.
Oh, yeah.
He told him how Dolly asked him to throw a gun in the La Brea tar pits.
Oh, man.
Also coming forward is John Faber, the neighbor who buried the other .25 caliber gun.
So there is a gun available now.
Well, he digs it up out from underneath the rose bush, and they actually got the other gun from the La Brea tar pits.
Really?
Yeah, they said it was in terrible shape. Both of them were in terrible shape.
Wow.
But they did have them.
Right.
Then a bank teller came forward to testify that Dolly and Otto shared a bank account. A cook from the house that lived next door testified that Dolly and Fred argued all the time, so loudly that he could hear it in the kitchen next door.
Wow.
Alvy Judkins came forward and told the police about the story of before moving to L.A., how Dolly told her that she would not divorce Fred, that he'd have to die.
Oh, man.
Then Philip Stover, the private investigator who was hired by Fred, testified that he followed Dolly and Otto on so many moonlit nights. Everybody who took the stand had something bad to say about Dolly.
She left a trail a mile long.
I mean, there were also reports in the newspaper about all of her neighbors. All the neighbor women are coming forward and being like, she's a hussy. This one, she's bad.
Yeah.
After the jury hears all the evidence against Dolly, they could not come to a verdict. It was a
Really?
hung jury, with most of them leaning toward acquittal.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Because she hired this Geisler guy
Okay.
from Hollywood.
All right.
Apparently, I mean, another Billy Flynn. He's tap dancing his ass off.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he gets her off.
Wow.
And the case against Dolly is dismissed.
Wow.
Now, Detective Herman Klein knew he didn't have enough evidence and he didn't have enough energy to keep pushing the case. And so that was the end of that.
Really?
Now, after the smoke cleared, Dolly began dating a man named Ray Burt Hedrick. Ray was Dolly's business manager.
Okay.
And by this time in 1936, Dolly is 56, not quite the looker that she once was.
Right.
She would date Ray for 30 years and
Wow.
marry him in 1961, just 2 weeks before she died on April 6th, 1961.
Wow. How old was she then?
81 years old.
Gee whiz.
Bert was 12 years younger than Dolly.
Wow.
And because of a will drawn up in 1953 before these two were ever married, Dolly left everything to Ray. Dolly left nothing to Otto.
Wow.
And speaking of Otto Sandhuber, he went back to using Walter Klein for the rest of his life. As far as anyone knows, he remained married to Matilda.
Okay.
But after he walked away from the courthouse that day, he disappeared into oblivion.
He yeeted on out of there.
He was gone. He was like, I'm done. I'm washing my hands. I'm finished.
Yeah.
Now, there have been a couple of movies about this. They did it as a comedy. Shirley MacLaine played in this comedy, The Bliss of Mrs. Blossom. And Ann Archer played Dolly, with Neil Patrick Harris playing Otto. This one was more of a dramatic role in a made-for-TV called The Man in the Attic.
Wow.
Now, today, the physical traces of Dolly and Fred and Otto's time in Milwaukee have all but disappeared. Oesterreich Manufacturing Company closed a long time ago. The home that the three of them shared on what is now South 16th Street has been razed. The sole remaining evidence that the family was even there in Milwaukee is the grave of Fred and Dolly's only child, Raymond, buried in 1910, just shy of his 10th birthday. The boy is interned at the Holy Trinity Cemetery. As for Dolly, she's buried in Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City next to Ray Burt Hedrick, who died in 1977.
Oh, wow.
Fred is also buried in Los Angeles in the famous cemetery.
Oh, Forest Lawn.
Forest Lawn.
Yeah,
That's
you-
exactly
I
right.
used to sing a John Denver tune called Forest Lawn.
Oh, my God.
It
Of course you did.
It was funny.
Oh, lay me down in forest lawn in a silver casket.
Of course you
Oh,
did.
lay me down in Forest Lawn in a silver casket. Okay, go ahead.
Well, that's what they did to Fred.
Yeah.
So Fred is buried by himself. Dolly is buried with her last husband of 2 weeks, who she left everything to. And then their son was buried all by himself in Milwaukee. So if you're ever laying in bed and hear somebody clear their throat,
Wow.
or you hear somebody cough, or you hear a distant typewriter that you
Yeah.
didn't know was supposed to be there.
You might want to sneak upstairs and check that out.
I mean, we've done a story about frogging, and that's basically what Otto's doing, except she knows he's there.
Yeah.
He's not a stowaway there by himself.
Yeah.
He was only frogging for Fred.
Yeah.
But that is the story of Fred, Dolly, and Otto. And that's all I have to say about that.
Well, hello, Dolly.
Hello, Dolly.
Jeez.
It was more like, hello, Otto. Can you imagine, like, walking into your house and somebody's eating your food?
Yeah.
And he's like, I knew you were eating my food.
It's just, I mean, the whole story is just like one big comedy. No wonder they did a comedy about it.
Well, and then they did.
Based on it.
I've seen the trailer of the one with Ann Archer, who I love.
Yeah.
I've seen it with her, and it's a little uncomfortable to watch because Neil Patrick Harris is like Doogie Howser.
Yeah.
And they're getting it on, even in the trailer. And I was like, oh, okay. I'll post the trailer in the In-Laws and Outlaws if you guys want to see it.
All right. Well, let's move on then.
Yeah, let's move on.
Goodbye, Dolly. So we're going to do a little Bless Your Heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right. Well, this one was sent in by Jasmine Aline, one of our Hitched to Homicide H2H In-Laws and Outlaws.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Yeah.
She used the form.
Yeah, she did. That was great. So Dateline, let me make sure I get this correct. Lasasil, Sweden.
Sweden.
Yeah. Now, if you're going to steal gas, make sure you're sucking from the right tank. Oh, man. This can only get worse. Yeah. A boat owner in Sweden got a surprise when he came down to his vessel. His fuel tank on the boat had been emptied on a couple occasions before.
No.
Yeah, no. As he approached the boat, he saw a piece of hose on the bridge and thought, oh, no, not again.
They got me again.
Yeah. But this third time that the fuel thief would strike, well, it all went a little wrong. The thief had put the hose in the sewage tank.
Oh.
That's right. The hose was still by the boat and vomit was on the bridge. Oh. I don't even know if I can get through this.
Oh, gosh.
The reason for the vomit was probably because the thief had accidentally removed the lid to the sewage tank, thinking it was the diesel tank when he was going to suck out the diesel. Ugh.
Choose the right tank.
Oh, man. The thief simply took the wrong lid. Instead of diesel, the perpetrator got up. Yes, something completely different. It's probably easy to do in the dark if you're in a hurry and have to choose a lid among several in the dark, says Thomas Anderson, who is a regional coordinator for the Police Boating Corporation West.
You did not choose wisely.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, this guy's lucky he didn't actually suck the sewage out instead of the diesel fuel. Oh, my
Or if he did, he learned his lesson.
Yeah, real quick. So anyway, that's
you didn't choose wisely.
That's our unfortunate bless your heart this week. Ugh.
Think about that next time you get on your boat.
Yeah, exactly. I could barely get through that one.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you have to do is go to hitchedtohomicide.com. There's a pull-down menu.
Yep.
You can also suggest a case.
Yep.
We love that. We
Yes.
love it lots.
Yes, we do.
That's my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
You know what? This was actually Valentine's week. Yesterday was Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day, baby.
Happy Valentine's.
I love you.
I love you more.
That's all we have this week.
All right.
Join us next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.